I'm a really big fan of video games. Games can do everything that other art forms can. Like movies, they can use the tricks and techniques of cinematography to capture the quiet struggles of one person and at the same time create a whole new world. Like the greatest paintings, they can capture moments of still, awe-inspiring beauty and let you stay in them. The best thing about games though is what they can do that the other art forms can't do. If movies and music are the art of seeing and hearing, games are the art of doing. Games are the only art form that you directly interact with, and it's through our interaction with them that games tell stories. For example, a great action-adventure game builds an exciting experience for players by giving them plenty of ways to interact with the world, whilst a truly scary survival horror game severely restricts the ways in which the player can interact with the world, instead giving that power to the monster that's chasing them. Player interactivity can be manipulated in loads of other ways beyond what I've talked about so far, creating all kinds of different gameplay experiences and genres, but I think that there's something beyond player interactivity that brings out the best in what games have to offer, and that's player choice. Sure, there are already lots of games that feature choice as a mechanic, but these games are in my opinion frustratingly limited in their approach to player choice. In some games, player choice is superficial, creating a false sense of agency in an experience that will pretty much stay the same no matter what snarky line of dialogue you choose, and in others, it's a gimmick that defines the entire game, where you get to make loads of choices, but you spend most of your time passively watching them play out in front of you. I think there's one game trilogy, however, that draws out the full potential of player choice, and that's Mass Effect. These games do one thing that elevates them to a place that other games just can't reach. They give players choices, ones that really matter. That sounds like a small thing, but it changes everything about what makes this medium so great. Mass Effect pushes way past the limits of just interacting with game worlds by giving you the ability to affect them however you choose. You care about the expansive cast of characters you meet, the fascinating planets you discover, and the storied civilizations you come across because they're all your responsibility. The choices you make in the first game come with real, lasting consequences that continue with you into the next games through imported saves, making every playthrough your own story. And none of this would matter though if we didn't care about the trilogy's characters. Trust me though, you will. These games are an absolute masterclass in both giving their characters room to grow and develop over the course of this 3-game long narrative, and giving you time with these characters, letting you forge your own relationships with them through the choices you make. Mass Effect wears the RPG crown, not just because it's an engrossing, thrilling space opera with the scale of Star Trek and the heart of Star Wars, but because within that scope, it never loses its focus on its characters and the player's relationship with them. In this video, I want to take a look at how Mass Effect gives the player meaningful, challenging choices that immerse them in the world and dictate what kind of character Commander Shepard will become, and form the foundation of the relationships between the player and the characters. After that, I want to see if the Mass Effect method can further improve some of the greatest games from last year, Ghost of Tsushima and The Last of Us Part 2. Let's start with how choice impacts Mass Effect's player character, Commander Shepard. Over the course of this trilogy, Shepard becomes a legend of intergalactic renown, but what defines that legend is up to you. The choices you make as Shepard are ones that both influence the story and shape Shepard's character into someone who evolves into something more than just an expression of your will. Well, Shepard's more something in between an expression of your will and your child that you raise with every choice you make. Okay, that might be a weird analogy, but let's stick with it for now. When you start playing as Shepard, you get to design everything about them, from their appearance and sex to their upbringing and military career. This may sound like a lot to do at the start of the game, but it doesn't take all that long, and once you've finished, you already have a connection to Shepard. What really builds your connection to Shepard, though, are the millions of choices you make after this point. I'll get into how complex these choices are later, but for now, let's talk about how they help you mould your Shepard. A general trend in Mass Effect choices is this. You can make Paragon choices that are good and achieve the best possible outcome for everyone involved. Or you can make Renegade choices, ones that aren't so clean and often lead to lots of people being unhappy or dead. And then there are the neutral options that advance the story quickly, but don't let you experience the extra consequences of Paragon or Renegade decisions that make Mass Effect so interesting. What makes the system work so well is the way in which these choices change Shepard's character. Every Paragon choice you make earns a Paragon point that contributes to your total Paragon score. As your Paragon score increases, you'll unlock more and more Paragon choices, and when that score is maxed out, you'll be able to achieve feats of heroism that seriously change the story of Mass Effect. The system works the same way for the darker choices too. Every morally murky decision earns a renegade point, which makes the scary red meter grow in size, and when that meter is full, your Shepard will become, in my opinion, a bit of a douchebag. What I love about this morality system is that it actually makes Shepard's character development a mechanic within the game. If you want your Shepard to be someone who will always do what's right, never compromising, even when the bad choice seems like the only option, you can actually make Shepard that character. They won't be able to choose significant renegade options later as they're, well, not evil enough, as you didn't want them to be that way. You might be thinking this sounds a little boring, only getting to create a good or bad Shepard, but the game still gives you some moral flexibility. If you want to make a more morally balanced Shepard, who's a great person but only occasionally kicks people out of windows mid-conversation, you can, and it won't interfere with your Paragon score. That doesn't mean that you can make any Paragon or Renegade choice whenever you want to though. If you've mostly made Paragon choices with only a few Renegade ones here and there, you'll only be able to make the Paragon or neutral choice during the game's biggest decisions. I think this restriction keeps your feeling of connection with Shepard though. It's a restriction that honours the character you've been building throughout the story by giving them moral boundaries that they won't cross, and that's key to the unique relationship the player has with Shepard. When you make big moral decisions that only the purest Paragon or scummiest Renegade can make, you feel pride as your choices made Shepard into someone who can make that decision. Speaking of choices, the story choices in Mass Effect aren't trivial ones that are chosen easily. They are loaded with moral ambiguity. These situations really put your sense of right and wrong to the test, and when you finally find an answer, that answer comes from your soul. Take the situation where Shepard's infiltrated a mercenary group that are trying to assassinate someone called Archangel, someone who we want to recruit for our mission. Early on in the mission, you act like just another innocent killer for hire, whilst you quietly sabotage the Merc's equipment to protect Archangel. As you sneak around, you find one mechanic working on this huge gunship that you and Archangel will have to face later. It's probably a good idea to sabotage this ship somehow, but killing the guy in front of you is the only way to do that. Sure, he's a mercenary whose work has indirectly hurt a lot of people, but as you talk to him, he becomes a person rather than an obstacle. And that makes killing him feel dishonourable and wrong. That's one of the smaller, taster examples, by the way. Ones later in the game are much more morally complex. Take this one for instance. Here you discover 2.1 million enemy Geth, a synthetic race that started to evolve into a race of individuals rather than just physical platforms for one digital hive mind. These particular Geth are rogue extremists that want to wipe out all organic life, so naturally they're a problem, but you have two ways to deal with them. One way is to access their code and rewrite them, forcibly indoctrinating them. The other option is destroying them. Earlier parts of the mission leading up to this choice bring up the topic of free will and how wrong it is to rob a race of that, especially one that's just discovered it. But is that really worse than killing them? I chose to kill them as I thought taking these beings' freedom was actually worse than ending their lives, but you might disagree with me, and that's awesome. That disagreement will lead us down different story paths, and that's what I really like about Mass Effect. The story of my Shepard will be different to yours. There's one more thing about the player's unique relationship with Shepard that I think is really important to mention too. This might be a personal thing, but exploring romances in video games has always felt a little icky to me. In a lot of these games, I'm either playing as someone who has no personality traits of their own and exists only as an extension of me, or someone who's a really well-defined character. In both cases, I feel weird choosing a romance path for that character, as, well, in example A, it kind of feels like the relationship's happening between a fictional character and me, which feels weird for so many reasons, and in example B, I'm playing as a character who I'm really familiar with, so stepping into their lives and choosing their partner feels really invasive and wrong. In Mass Effect though, Shepard strikes that perfect balance between feeling like my creation and being a character that exists outside of my will, and that lets me comfortably explore the romance paths in these games without feeling like a mega weirdo. In Mass Effect, the connection between you and Shepard is as powerful as it is wonderfully unique. Crucially though, this connection between the player and Commander Shepard is only possible through player choice, and the moral ambiguities of the game's many decisions. I think that if other games followed the Mass Effect method when figuring out how much control the player has over the protagonist, these games will be able to create even deeper bonds between players and the heroes they play. What makes all of this choice truly meaningful, though, is the characters that will experience the consequences of those choices. Across the trilogy, the Mass Effect games carve out plenty of time for its characters to deal with their own complex personal challenges that the player directly helps them resolve with their choices. One of the standout scenarios like this is in Mass Effect 1, the Vermire mission. Throughout the first game, you learn about the history of your squadmate, Wrex, and his people, the Krogan. You learn that the Krogan have been suffering as a result of the genophage, a sterility virus that allows for only 1 out of 1,000 births to survive. Initially, Wrex gives off the impression that he's given up on the Krogan, but as you get to know him, you see that Wrex still has hope for the Krogan race. Wrex's challenge is overcoming his anger and letting his optimism, buried under all that rage, lead him and the Krogan towards a brighter tomorrow. And during the Vermire mission, your choices decide whether or not Wrex's hope overcomes his fury. During the mission, you find out that the main villain, Saren, has found a way to bypass the genophage and produce new Krogans. The only catch is that these Krogans are indoctrinated servants rather than free-thinking people. Wrex's anger blinds him, preventing him from seeing that an army of mind-controlled Krogan is in no way the revival of his people that he's dreamed of, and he takes a desperate stand against you and your squad. If your Paragon or Renegade scores too low, you'll have no choice but to kill Wrex and carry on with the mission. But if you have a high enough score, you're able to appeal to his hope rather than his rage, and make him see that this isn't how the Krogan should return. Our choices directly connect us to Wrex's goals, and that connection is the foundation for a trilogy-spanning friendship between you and Wrex that feels real and earned, and is strengthened by every choice you continue to make in the future. Mass Effect 2 does an even better job at giving the squad mates their own character arcs that you play a part in with the loyalty missions. A little while after you recruit the core squad mates, they'll open up to you about the challenges they're facing and ask for your help in overcoming them. I know this has all the signs of a tedious side mission, but I promise you, these loyalty missions are fantastic and easily some of my favourite parts of the series. These missions are substantial, standing on their own 2 feet, and they nicely set the stage for the main focus of these missions, the characters. The characters at the core of these loyalty missions get fully fleshed out stories that reveal much more about them than we've learned so far, whilst challenging them in ways that will seriously change the trajectory of their character arcs. As these characters take on these challenges though, you're right there with them, helping them make the right choice and grow past their weaknesses. What really makes these loyalty missions work though is how complex these stories are. Jack's loyalty mission is all about overcoming trauma and finding strength in her past rather than pain. Garrus' mission is focused on his internal battle between his sense of justice and his desire for revenge. Morden's mission interrogates the morality of doing evil things for the greater good, forcing him to decide whether or not to use medical data obtained through torture to create a cure. All of these challenges the characters face are overcome with your help, and I think this has the same effect on your bonds with these characters that helping a friend in real life does. You both work on that problem together, and when you overcome it, you did so as part of a team, and that experience brings you closer together. These loyalty missions, with their complexity and character focus, recreate that feeling, and use it to forge bonds between you and this cast of characters in ways that no other game has done before. I think the magic of Mass Effect comes from moments where it marries player choice to the stories of the characters, creating powerful, personal connections between you and the cast. And in my opinion, no part of the trilogy does that better than Mass Effect 2's finale, the Suicide Mission. This is the ultimate test of your connection to the characters and your responsibility as a leader. First of all, if you haven't completed the loyalty missions for the characters, they might not actually make it into Mass Effect 3. Unlike other games, this doesn't count as a mission fail. If you beat the boss without those characters, when you transfer your save to Mass Effect 3, they won't be there with you in the final battle. Completing the loyalty missions beforehand is the easy part though. The true challenge is in the mission itself. On your way to the fight, your ship's targeted by all of the enemy's weaponry. If you spoke to your crew beforehand and asked their thoughts on the mission, they would have given you upgrade ideas for the ship that'll protect you all during this first phase, but if you didn't talk to anyone, you'll lose a random 2 squad mates. Everything from this point onwards is where things get really complicated. The mission presents you with a number of challenges that'll force you to split up your squad and assign different characters to different tasks. If you know your teammates well enough, you'll pick the right characters for the right jobs, but if you choose poorly, those characters will die even if you've completed the loyalty mission. When the suicide mission's finally over, and you see everyone alive, victors of an impossible battle, knowing that because of your actions, you'll see them again in Mass Effect 3? That feeling is one that no other game has made me feel, and that's down to the Mass Effect method. Giving the player choice, but making that choice meaningful by marrying it to the story's characters, making this an experience that's more powerful and personal than any other game. Okay, I've compared the way Mass Effect integrates player choice in the story to other games loads of times in this video to demonstrate why I think all games should do it this way, but I think the best way to make my case is to take two of the biggest games from last year, The Last of Us Part 2 and Ghost of Tsushima, look at their flaws and then show how the Mass Effect method can remove those flaws. The Last of Us Part 2 is a hugely ambitious game. It's a terrifyingly effective revenge strategy that tells a story through gameplay that's disturbing and destructive in ways that make playing it an increasingly uncomfortable experience, to the point that we start to doubt how much we're on board with the missions of the main characters. Now, there's been a lot of, let's call it debate, surrounding the game's ending, but I want to focus on one particular flaw of it. So much of the game leading up to the finale has been a test of our loyalty to Ellie's cause. We've played as her as she's done some truly abhorrent things for the sake of vengeance. The game has made us do these abhorrent things with her as a way of making us feel the darkness that's eating away at Ellie, and feel that darkness disconnect us from her. All of these sequences are part of the game's efforts to convince us that revenge is too destructive to be good, and justice comes from a pure intention, but some people weren't convinced by this argument. I don't think that's a fault of the game though. It hasn't presented its ideas obviously, it's left plenty of room for interpretation. It clearly wants its players to find themselves in a mist of moral ambiguity. This is why I think this game would have been much better if it let the player find their way out of that fog themselves, by letting them choose how Ellie's dark story ends. We connect so acutely to Commander Shepard because we're able to shape Shepard's morality with our choices. The Last of Us Part 2 is a game that's constantly challenging our morality with Ellie's horrific acts of violence. I think the game should have given players a chance to answer its challenge by choosing to either side with Ellie and kill Abby, or use their influence to save her from that path. Okay, just in case you're still not completely convinced that player choice can elevate game design, I've got another example that'll definitely win you over. Ghost of Tsushima. This game's got a lot going for it. It's a sweeping action-adventure epic with a compelling story, a great combat system, a stunning and innovative open world, but it, in my opinion, has one weakness. The story is tainted by what people call leader-narrative dissonance, meaning that there's a disconnect between what the players experience in gameplay and what they experience in the story. In the story of Tsushima, you play as Jin, a samurai fighting off a Mongol invasion. The game gives you two main ways to play. You can either be a traditional samurai, taking enemies on directly and honourably, or you could strike from the shadows with tactics that would make even the most vicious and unforgiving of warriors shudder. This all sounds pretty good, right? You get to build the legend of Jin the samurai, or Jin the ghost, through the gameplay choices you make. The only problem is the story doesn't care about the choices you make here. No matter how much you abstain from dishonourable stealth kills or poison dart attacks, the story still sees Jin become the ghost, and you're left with that pesky feeling of leader narrative dissonance. It's a great story, but our actions don't matter. The game does make you feel a little guilty if you act like the ghost too early in gameplay, with flashbacks of Jin's uncle teaching him the ways of the samurai, but aside from video game uncle guilt, your gameplay choices are discarded by the story. If this game gave the player the choice to adopt the ways of the ghost or stick to the ways of the samurai with branching story paths for each decision, I think this game would have been a much greater experience. Okay, you might be thinking, come on Omar, not every game can have player choice integrated within the story. It's an unrealistic expectation of the industry to work something like that into traditionally linear story experiences that need to meet the expectations of a large audience. Okay, first of all, wow, but to that I say this. Tsushima already has player choice, albeit exactly one player choice, and right at the end. You can commit to the ghost by sparing your uncle's life and encourage him to move past his archaic ideas of honour, or you can kill him and validate his foolish devotion to the ways of the past. I don't understand why they shoved this choice right at the end of an experience that has consistently made the player a passive part of the story, but I think it signifies that the developers are clearly aware of the power of choice. They just integrated it poorly. Both The Last of Us and Ghost of Tsushima are great games, but I think they show quite nicely how player choice is the key to realising the true potential of games. I think the games industry is finally moving past the blight of service games and multiplayer-only titles and is slowly edging towards a resurgence in strong, story-driven games. We're even seeing the return of Mass Effect with a mysterious new game. Now is the perfect time for this next generation of narrative-focused experiences to try to discover something new in how games tell stories, and I think player choice is the key to achieving that. Mass Effect gets so much right, giving the player choices that shape the story world and the story's characters, creating relationships that the player cherishes, and I can't help but think about what other games could be in the future if they explored Mass Effect's ideas even further. Some of the best games of today are the ones that are exploring this new frontier in game design, and I hope that all games find ways to evolve past the art of doing, becoming the art of choice. Thank you so much for watching. Okay, we've now reached a point in the video where it's time for you to make a choice of your own. You can make the really awesome Paragon choice and leave a like and maybe even subscribe. You can make the significantly less cool Renegade choice and dislike. Or you can make the bonus Paragon choice and not only like and subscribe, but leave a comment about what I could do differently, and also let me know what you'd like to see me cover on the channel in the future. Hit that bell icon and I'll see you all in the next one.